Oh, come on, please. Let's get this out of the way first. Yes, I believe that ghosts exist. Yes, I believe in the supernatural. And yes, I'm absolutely, positively terrified of pretty much anything spooky. And if you don't fall into one of those categories, then this story probably isn't for you. This is the scariest thing that ever happened to me. I'm here. I've always been skeptical of the supernatural. Ghosts, demons, haunted houses. None of it ever made sense to me. I believed there was always a logical explanation for everything. You see a ghost, it was probably a trick of the light or some overactive imagination. Hear a knock on the roof in the middle of the night? Must have been a branch or some hail. Feel a cold spot in an old house? It was probably just drafty. Even as a kid, I never bought into ghost stories. I figured there was always a logical explanation, even if it took some sleuthing to find. I didn't believe in haunted houses, that was for sure. So naturally, when I became a writer, I gravitated toward writing about the rational world. All my stories, even the ones with fantasy elements, had to abide by the laws of science. That is, until last winter. I had just moved into a small rental cabin deep in the woods of Maine. No neighbors, no phone signal. It was the perfect place for me to disconnect from the rest of the world and finish my novel. Unfortunately, I wasn't alone. The first night, I heard tapping on the window. It was faint at first, like fingers gently brushing the glass. At first, I thought it was just the wind. The windows were old and rattled easily. The house was big and drafty. I'd heard strange sounds before, so I ignored it and went back to my book. But the tapping continued, growing louder and more insistent. Same time, every night, same rhythm, slow and deliberate. 3 taps, followed by eerie silence. Then, just as suddenly, it would start again. My heart would jump. I'd sit bolt upright in bed and listen intently. But by the time I got out of bed to investigate, everything was silent. I'd step up to the window and press my ear against the cold glass, but I couldn't hear anything. And when I turned around to go back inside, the tapping happened again, but now it was coming from the other side of the house, the back window. My heart dropped. I rushed to the back, but again nothing. From the outside it looked normal, just an old window covered in frost and snow. Nothing had disturbed the white blanket covering the lawn. I told myself I was tired. Making the connection between the sound and the window had taken too much effort. It must have all been in my head, so I tried to go back to sleep. The tapping kept me awake for a few nights, but after a while, I grew accustomed to it. Then the other things started to happen. Doors would open on their own. I'd hear footsteps upstairs when I was alone. Sometimes the smell of pipe tobacco, strong enough to make my eyes water, would permeate the house. One morning, I woke up to the sound of singing. Not a song I recognized, but sung in a language that sounded old. I never saw anyone else in the house. In fact, it was clear no one else had been there for a long time. Dust lay thick on the furniture. Cobwebs stretched across the rooms. It hadn't been used for years. I wondered if the previous owner had been an eccentric old woman who'd lived there alone and died. But I'd Googled the address and found nothing but a real estate listing and a history of the town that made no mention of a previous resident. Then I found the door. I was exploring the basement one day, looking for the fuse box when I discovered it. It was hidden behind a loose panel, a small, narrow wooden door with a rusted iron handle. I should have left it alone. I should have walked away, but something drew me in, curiosity, or maybe something else, something I couldn't name. When I opened it, the air shifted. It felt heavier, colder, like something ancient had been disturbed. The room beyond was pitch black. And yet I could feel the shape of the place, a square room with 4 walls and a floor that sloped slightly downward. And something else, something stood in the center of the room. I took a tentative step forward, then another. Something told me not to, but my feet wouldn't stop moving. They wanted to see what was in that room, and there was only one way to find out. I realized then that I needed a light, but it was too late. I had already crossed the threshold. What I found was wrong. The room was filled with symbols, all drawn in something dark and dry, like dried blood, though there was no blood. There were circles and spirals, lines and dots, shapes I couldn't recognize, all arranged in an intricate pattern around the edges of the room. But that wasn't the worst of it. In the center of the room, surrounded by a circle of symbols, lay bones. They were small, delicate bones, finger bones, toenails. I don't want to be too graphic, but they were laid out in a circle with disturbing precision, almost like a macabre mosaic. And in the middle, where the circle of bones intersected, was a mirror. It was old, tarnished, but its glass was clear. It was propped up against the wall at a jaunty angle, as if waiting for someone. I wanted to run, I really did. But something held me there, compelled me to move closer, to take a step forward, to reach out and touch it. But when I did, the air crackled with energy. The hair on my arms rose. I yanked my hand back as if burned. And that's when I saw what was in the mirror. It wasn't me. It stared back at me, grinning in the dark. My face, but twisted and distorted, a mockery of my own. Its skin was grey, stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. Its eyes were black, bottomless pools of ink in a face that was both skeletal and fleshy. I felt my breath catch in my throat. My hands tightened into fists. The thing in the mirror mimicked my movements, raising its hand before I did, fingers curling into claws. It was grinning now, baring teeth that were too sharp, too long, and far too numerous. I stumbled back, tripped over a bone, and fell onto the cold, hard ground. I screamed. I don't remember screaming, but the sound came out of me nonetheless. It echoed in the confined space, bouncing off the walls until it was a distant roar. I scrambled to my feet and ran. I sprinted through the narrow passage, crashing into the wall with no concern for my own safety. I pushed on, desperate to escape the feeling that something or someone was gaining on me. Finally, I burst through the door, slamming it behind me. Heart pounding in my chest, I raced up the stairs and stumbled into the living room. I didn't stop running until I reached my bedroom, barricaded myself inside with a chair, and called 911. I told them about the house, about what I'd seen in the mirror. And then I waited for the inevitable. They didn't find anything, they never do. The operator was kind, understanding, but firm. She said she'd send someone right away, but when they arrived, the only thing they found was a very frightened young woman and a very old house. The officer asked me questions, trying to determine if I was hurt or in danger. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. I didn't tell him about the door. I couldn't. I didn't want anyone to think I was crazy. So I let him escort me back downstairs to check for intruders, though I knew there weren't any. I knew because I could still feel his presence behind me, watching, waiting. I left that night. I packed what little I had and drove to a hotel. I never went back to that house, but sometimes when I close my eyes, I still see that face grinning in the dark, waiting for me to return. And if I do, will it be waiting for me?